climate march in New York, where a bunch of climate activists was demanding that we end fossil fuels and for Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency. We demand that Joe Biden end fossil fuels and declare a climate emergency, or we will vote for him again. Fam, this was a glorified DNC event. You had the Sunrise Movement that was there, who sheep-herds young climate activists into the Democratic Party, and they were notorious Biden supporters. Fam, they had one of the biggest sellouts of our generation at the event, AOC, and they treated her like a rock star.
We organize out of hope. We organize out of commitment. We organize out of love. We organize out of the beauty of our future.
We organize around the Nord Stream pipeline bomber. Hey, AOC, I'm still waiting for you to answer this question. What is the carbon footprint of the Ukraine proxy war that you continue to vote to fund? Joe Biden is the biggest eco-terrorist in modern human history after blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. Anyone who endorsed Joe Biden should not be allowed at this event. The fact that we have climate activists that continue to prop up the DNC, AOC, and refuse to call out the military-industrial complex shows that they truly don't believe in what they are saying and hurt the legitimacy of their movement. What's popping? My friends, my family. Someone has to call these people out, right? Like, these people annoy me because, as I said before, I actually care about the climate. I think it's a higher calling, and I'm not religious, right? Caring about stuff, caring about human rights, caring about advancing our species to the next level in terms of morality and how we can improve each other's lives. That is what separates us from beast. That is what separates us from animal. The fact that we care. There are a lot of propagandized puppets, a lot of people who believe in individualism, right? Who they all about themselves. How can I improve myself? How can I get my next meal? How can I get my next squeeze? What's the difference between you and a beast? A beast hunts. A beast just care about taking care of themselves and their family. And there are a lot of people in politics who only care about that. They only care about them. They only care about issue when it affects them. Once again, what separates you from a beast? So I care about climate. That's why I'm calling out these frauds in the modern climate justice movement, because they lost me. They lost me. Do you guys remember the people who cared so much about the sanctity of protest events during the rage against the war machine? Where they were nitpicking every fucking speaker at the event? Because surely they didn't want to undermine it. Surely that wasn't the goal. These same people who care so much about the sanctity of these events are nowhere to be heard from regarding these climate activists who turned a climate protest into a glorified DNC event. They rolled the red carpet out for AOC, had Jamal Bowman speaking. People who endorsed and supported the Nord Stream pipeline bomber, the largest eco-terrorist in modern human history. In a professional managerial class, despite the many sins of AOC and Bernie Sanders and the squad, they are trying to rehabilitate them and allow them in our spaces. After AOC's massive betrayal of the workers, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Jamal Bowman, they aren't allowed in left spaces until they reconcile their actions. That is not what she did. They brought AOC there to do a campaign event. Sunrise women doing rah-rah when you know they're going to endorse Joe Biden. And now we're going to cover this here very soon. You had the Biden unveiling another government agency and jobs program for PNC liberal kids. And now the climate activists who are endorsing the Nord Stream pipeline bomber, the party that expanded public drilling and oil access, they're now like, we did it. We won the climate crisis because of a glorified jobs program. I'm going to give you guys thoughts on this. This is the big announcement. And I mentioned before, I don't buy into the lesser two evils argument. That's one thing I put back hard on anyone, especially the modern Bernie Sanders left, who their whole politics is lesser two evilisms. at this point. The Biden administration has been as awful on climate as the Republicans, easily. Doubled down on Trump, oil drilling. He also had was the Nord Stream pipeline bomber, the biggest act of eco-terrorism in modern human history, approved of the Willow Project. But now, Gen Z progressives and DNC payroll progressives, just as Democrats, they found a way, they found a talking point that they're going to use that completely erases Biden's sins, where they're going to talk about, oh, we have a jobs program now. We have this climate corps. And the people who celebrate this is Bernie Sanders. These are the people who refuse to call out militarism. The United States military is the largest polluter in human history. You had the top 1% that are responsible for 71% of all emissions. So when I talk about the climate struggle, it doesn't turn the workers off, because I talk about the climate struggle in terms of class war. If there's no conversation about class war, we are wasting our time. So here's Bernie Sanders. I'll play just a little bit of this, of being a DNC propagandist. And I want to give you guys thoughts on this, but I'll just play a little bit of this.
Thank you. Let me thank Ed and Alexandria for their leadership role in this important effort. And we thank all of you throughout this country for understanding that there will not be a future for this planet unless we all come together and make a radical transition from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And that is what the Climate Corps Project is all about. What many of us have understood from day one is not only that the climate crisis is an existential threat to the planet, and I don't have to tell anybody here what has gone on this last summer. You got to be dumb and blind not to understand what climate is doing. Not only
the climate is an existential threat, but it's not important enough to stop waging war with Russia. You had the Ukraine war, which is horrible for the climate. Bernie Sanders and the Sunrise Movement refused to say anything about the Nord Stream pipeline bombing. This is the Sunrise Movement talking about the Climate Corps. This is a major victory for our movement, our generation, in our fight for a Green New Deal, which is AOC's Green New Deal is essentially a corporate giveaway. And this is the last time we'll share, and I'll pass it to you guys for your thoughts on this. And then I want to get past the story real quick, because I want to get to Ukraine and China as well. So this is if you actually care about the environment, if you actually believe in what you say, like I do. Like I said, I'm one of the people that puts back on people that say, oh, fuck, the people like, fuck the environment. No, we have a right, and if you're religious, you have a godly duty. I'm not religious, but if you're a Christian or any other religious, you have a godly duty to protect this earth. Once again, I'm not religious, and I believe that. There's something in my core, in my being, that tells me that, right? So I care. So as someone who cares, I'm calling out these frauds that delegitimize the climate movement, right? So I'm sorry I went long, but I want to do this quick presentation. I'm going to show you guys these receipts, and I'm going to give you guys opinions on this. But this is the Nord Stream gas leaks may be the biggest ever, with warning of large climate risks. The Nord Stream pipelines have stopped leaking, but the methane emitted broke records, and I'll cover this on Nick and CJ on Monday. The second largest leak ever was 85 to 90 kilograms or whatever of methane. The Nord Stream pipeline was 190 kilos, so it was 2 times more than the largest methane leak of our time, and methane is way more lethal to the environment than carbon dioxide. In the Nord Stream, 90% of the contents was methane. One of the biggest, people are still wrapping their mind around how big of an environmental disaster this has been. But you want to know what the deeply unserious Sunrise Movement? They have nothing to say about it. Not one damn thing. And I know I went long here, but I want to do this quick presentation. No conversation about the Nord Stream, the most kilotons. I appreciate it. I think someone corrected me. I tell you guys, I'm not a scientist. I'll just read. Kilotons of methane. The people who care so much about the environment, nothing on this. Nothing from Bernie Sanders. So I'm sorry I went long, but I want to pass it to Carlos first, then Eddie. I want to get your thoughts on the modern climate justice movement and what you think, from your perspective as Marxists, our approach to this issue should be. Because I'm very hesitant from liberal talking points on this issue that wants the workers to sacrifice before they dismantle the military-industrial complex. I want to hear what your guys thought, whether you want to push back on me or not. But I want to hear what you're thinking, Carlos.
Well, the analysis you're providing is the Marxist analysis, right? Which is situating this struggle as a within the context of the class struggle, specifically the form that struggle takes through the struggle against imperialism. And as you just mentioned, there hasn't been a bigger leak of methane than the Nord Stream pipeline bombing, which is the biggest environmental terrorist act, and economic to some extent as well, because the impact it's had on Germany, Europe, and what they're calling Germany's deindustrialization, and the threat that's bringing to their economy, which is currently in recession. Some specialists say that it'll likely be in a depression soon. So it's been a tremendous disaster, and none of these so-called leftist progressive groups have mentioned anything. And I think it's important to remember that it's not just the war against Russia, it's also a war that's turning, I think it's going to have to turn pretty soon more explicitly into a war against China, which is, I think, the central obstacle of this new Cold War. And China is one of the countries that's leading the global efforts against climate change, developing renewable technologies, planting forests the size of Ireland, and promoting that this task, which is true, if it's going to work, it can't just be one country. It has to be done through cooperation. And it's doing their sustainable, what they call, an ecological civilization. They're doing it in a way that rejects the binary of you either have sustainability or you have an increase in the people's living standards. For them, you can have an increase in the people's living standards while being sustainable, which means that you can have such a thing called sustainable growth. And this is something that even groups like the Sunrise Movement, when the pandemic first occurred, you had many chapters of the Sunrise Movement putting out comments such as COVID is the cure, people are the virus, sort of thing. This very Malthusian narrative that blames all of climate issues on overpopulation. And it's a form of neo-Malthusianism, an environmental neo-Malthusianism. And it accepts this binary that a lot of people on the left accept, which is you either have the development of more efficient, productive forces that raise the living standards of your people, which is what socialism was always understood as being, breaking through the fetters that capitalist relations presents for the development of the forces of production, or you have sustainability. And China has broken through that binary. So this war against China, if the lens that you analyze the world through is environmentalism, this war against China is a war against the country and the global force that's leading the environmental movement at the global scale. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna cover that later. I'm gonna show you guys some unhinged segments from both MSNBC and Fox News, so both parties, essentially fear mongering, pushing war with China, very hard. I want to show you guys this. I saw this a little bit earlier. Let's see if I can put this on the screen here. In China, have made historic reductions in their carbon emissions over the last 10 years. Way more than the West, 71% decrease. I got to look at the exact number again, over the last 10 years. I saw this earlier. China's first 100 MW, I know what that stands for, solar power plant uses 12,000 mirrors and is capable of producing energy throughout the day and night. We have solutions, dump fossil fuels and implement them. And I've seen many things like this before. New technology coming out of China that is meant to address the climate crisis, new ways of producing energy. And this completely destroys the argument and mindset of the West that without capitalism, without rugged free market capitalism, there is no innovation. The innovation we are seeing out of China is astounding, and it just scratches the surface. But I want to get Eddie in here for your thoughts on this segment, then we move on and we can discuss in Ukraine here soon. Go ahead, Eddie.
For sure, I agree with everything Carlos said. And it's interesting, actually, one of the things that Carlos and I first bonded over was a book called Facing the Anthropocene by an ecological Marxist named Ian Angus, who argues that the only solution to the climate crisis is eco-socialism. Capitalism is an anarchic mode of production. It doesn't look out for people nor the environment. It only looks out for profits. And fossil fuels are highly powerful and easy to store. So as long as we have market competition, capitalists will always be incentivized to use it. So you get these two kind of forms of environmentalism that aren't helpful. Malthusianism that Carlos mentioned, which basically says depopulation is the answer, which is anti-Marxist and anti-humanity. And then you have liberal environmentalism, which tries to distill everything to individualized solutions. Just stop golfing, just stop eating meat, just stop taking showers and drink through cardboard straws, and the climate crisis will go away. It's not realistic. Most of the emissions are coming from a handful of hyper-polluting corporations, plus the U.S. military that we've mentioned in depth. And if you go back to what Marx says about the environment, he does say labor is the source of all value, but also nature, because labor needs to interact with nature in order to produce the things that we need. And like I said, capitalism is an anarchic mode of production that places profit ahead of nature and ahead of people. So unless we get control of production through socialism and central planning, it's going to continue to destroy the environment as long as that's what's best for the profits of the people running our economy. So I'd say it's rooted in the anarchy of the capitalist mode of production. And without advancing the class struggle and overthrowing the capitalist class, there's no solution to the climate crisis, which is why these groups like Sunrise and these liberal environmentalist groups, I know there are people who work for these groups who are well-meaning and stuff, but I believe they're missing the mark.
That's why I called the organization out, because I explained to you guys before, the first group I ever volunteered with was Kansas City Sunrise. And the people I met there was Marxist, socialists, people who are undeniably on the left. And then a lot of them left because they realized the organization was scam and fraudulent. And like many organizations, and from my personal experience, I was at the George Floyd protest. When you talk to people who was there, really radical people who wanted to overthrow and dismantle our police state. But then you have Black Lives Matter, who was endorsing Jim Crow Joe and the Democratic Party. You had infiltrators who scam money, and this will always happen. So I think it's upon us to call these fraudulent organizations out, because this is an issue I legitimately care about. It's our community that is poisoned by the military-industrial complex. And when I see the liberal approach to this issue, when I see this bottom approach, instead of looking at a top-down approach, looking at an approach that will help the workers, they constantly ask us to make sacrifices. But this is the reality. Let me pull this up here. And this is what Eddie alluded to earlier. Just 100 companies responsible for 71% of global emissions, study says. So this is why I say there's no climate fight, there's no climate struggle that is not rooted in class struggle, that is not rooted in anti-imperialism. I cover foreign policy every damn show. We're going to do it again today, because it's the most important lens to view politics if you consider yourself on the left. But we have leftist organizations like the Sunrise Movement and all these jokes in the Bernie Sanders left who talk about politics and never mention foreign policy, never mention the North Stream pipeline, never mention this. U.S. military pollution, the world's biggest climate change enabler. The United States military, the largest polluting industry organization in human history. Not a peep from the Sunrise Movement, not a peak of criticism from these people, because they essentially made asses of what it means to be a climate justice advocate. They essentially follow the talking points of the DNC. Everything through class struggle. Now I'm gonna show you guys this, because this is the person who Joe Biden, that Sunrise endorsed, Jim Crow Joe. Well, he admits his giant act of terrorism. Now, you had Seymour Hersh, who exposed Abu Ghraib. He broke so many giant news stories. One of the most credible international journalists of our time, with many sources. Not only do you have him, you have motive. Like if you're a detective, you're trying to figure out what's going on here. You use motive, right? So here's one of the motives here. Listen.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring it in.
He just says it. But Sunrise and Bernie, AOC, and the entire crystal ball Kyle Kalinske left that's preaching that Democrats are the lesser two evils, they just whoop, whoop, whoop. We don't see anything. We don't hear anything.
I mean,
anyway, go ahead, Eddie. I'll pass to you guys for last thoughts before I move on.
I was just gonna say we can't rule out that Russia blew up their own pipeline. You know, I saw that suggested by some very credible CNN experts. So,
yeah, because our enemies are all powerful and dangerous, and if we don't stop them in Ukraine, they're gonna take over Europe because Putin is so conniving and manipulative and evil. But at the same time, he's a dumbass that blew up the Nord Stream. that keeps Germany energy dependent on Russia. So the West, especially the United States, went to sever the connection between Germany and Russia. This has been a long-standing goal for decades. Have Europe come back to energy dependence to the West instead of Russia. So having the Nord Stream pipeline bomb happen is horrible for the Russian people, and it's also horrible for the German people. What a lot of people did not report on, which I did report on, when the Nord Stream pipeline bombing happened, where you had United States helicopter that was caught hovering the area, one of the things that was exposed. Not only Seymour Hersh reported that, multiple people reported that. You had sanctioned the United States and Germany Twitter. That was trending. So the German people know what's going on. You had German anti-NATO protests. They know what's going on. It's about decreasing their quality of life in order to have endless war in Ukraine.